Welcome to Chapter 4 of the 4 Agreements. Don't make assumptions. If you are new to this book study, I am doing the entire book over a series of weeks. I will put the playlist right here so that you can go check out the first 3 chapters and get caught up. And if you click subscribe, you'll get notified when the next chapters are released. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the key takeaways from this particular chapter, and then I will present you with some ideas on how you can implement it in your life. Now, the very first takeaway is most of the time that you are taking something personally. So from our last chapter, not taking things personally, most of the time when you are taking things personally, it is because you have made an assumption. And so these 2 chapters go hand in hand very closely. In fact, most of the time when I have worked on my own issues with taking things personally, it comes back to asking myself, what am I assuming? And so knowing that will really help you work through all of those issues at once, because when you combine the 2 to problem solve, it becomes that much easier. All right, so our second takeaway in this chapter is that we don't understand something. Our mind begins to fill in the gaps. It's human nature to really want to know what's going on and understand everything. The unknown is dangerous. So when we don't understand something and there's unknown information around us, what we do is automatically start making assumptions and filling in the gaps. And we don't even know we're doing this. It's way that we are born, that our brain wants to function like this. And so keep that in mind as you are going through this book, that when you don't know the answer, your brain is trying to put information in there, and most of that is an assumption. Now, our third takeaway is that most of our relationship problems are because we are making assumptions. And now that is on 2 sides. One, we are assuming what the other person needs, wants, thinks. We're placing assumptions and not listening or asking what they need. The flip side of that is we are making assumptions by what they know we need. We're not giving them the adequate information in order to, have a healthy relationship. And in fact, when you combine these 2 versions of assumptions together, you can see how a relationship can get quickly out of control. So if I want you to do something for me, let's pretend I want you to call me at 6 o'clock. And I don't tell you, call me at 6 o'clock. And then I get mad at you when you don't call me at 6 o'clock. You then go, well, what did I do wrong? And so instead of asking me what you did wrong, you start making assumptions. You start going through your day. What did I do wrong? So I assumed you knew when to call me and then got mad at you when you didn't. You then assumed you did something wrong when I got mad at you, and you started making all these assumptions about what you did or didn't do. And you can see how this cycle can just take on a life of its own. And this happens in every single relationship and every single situation we're in. And so you can see very, very quickly how making an assumption completely alter the quality of your life. Our fourth takeaway is that because of the way our mind works, it's really easy to make assumptions. Now, what do I mean by this, but the way our minds work? Well, our brain is designed to take the information as it comes at us and to filter it. And if it doesn't recognize something or doesn't know something, oftentimes it quickly pushes it to the side. Now, it does this because honestly, if we had to process every single input that came at us, we would get nothing done. And so what our brain does is it learns things. And so then it has this memory base. So when something comes in, it goes important, unimportant, and it shoves it out. And so what happens when we're making assumptions and we pair what our brain is doing, and no, this isn't in the book. This is just I think this is the best way to describe this. You make these assumptions based on what your brain is doing, and we don't even realize that we're doing it. We really, truly don't realize it. So by default, we assume that our beliefs, the way that we do things, our opinions are true. They are true for us, but our brains filters out every other possibility of it being different. So what happens then when we take something and make an assumption about it is we are comparing it to our experiences and what is stored in our brain. So if I make the assumption that the fastest way to get emotional healing is through journaling, which I do, and I won't let my brain kind of go outside this zone, I am assuming then that that's the best for you. But that might not actually be true. And as much as I think journaling is fantastic and everybody should do it, there are people that it simply won't work for. And so if I stay laser focused on what is true to me, because that's what my brain is holding on to, then I begin to make all these different assumptions about what other people can and can't do and how they're acting. And this is another one that if you understand this, you can see how things can escalate really quickly out of control. A lot of that is actually what's going on in our society right now. People cannot wrap their brains around the idea that other people don't think like that, don't function like that. And so we want to be very conscious of the fact that we are making assumptions based on beliefs that we have that we might not even realize that other people don't have. Okay, our next takeaway is that we make assumptions about ourselves. And this is very true, whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, but what we tell ourselves is oftentimes an assumption. Now, this goes back to some of the way that beliefs are formed. And if you're still kind of confused about that, go back to chapter 1. That really is the chapter that helps you understand these underlying principles. And once you get those, it's easier to get the rest of the book. But what happens is you might have been told one thing forever, like you have a bad voice is the example that he uses at some point during the book. You have a bad voice. Well, you've been told that so often that you believe that, but actually that could be an assumption based on other people's opinions, because in reality you have a very good voice. And so we have to be careful of these assumptions that we're making about ourselves. What are we telling ourselves that we can and can't do, and is that true or not? Now, the final takeaway from this chapter is that real love, authentic, unconditional love, is not wanting to change the other person. Now, I know that this section can be really hard to process because, we're taught compromise and we're taught all these things about being nice and working with others and growing. But really what we need to approach this as is, if you feel the need to change somebody, then that is just not a healthy relationship. And the assumption that is being made at that point is that you can change them or that they can change themselves. There's all these little assumptions in there with not honoring authentic love. Now, I will say that this can also get into very tricky territory if you want to kind of go a dividing line of, okay, well, what is working with somebody? And so let's use a really simple example of, I'm thinking about moving in with my partner. How are we going to handle whether the toilet seat is up or down? Okay, now that is a compromise. That is not changing somebody. We have to have some level of agreed upon concepts in order to cohabitate successfully. Now, on the flip side, let's use an example of somebody's maybe too loud and the other person really likes quiet. Wanting that person to change the overall volume of their voice and the overall volume of their activities is wanting the person to change. Now, if you say, hey, I need it quiet between 10 a.m. and noon because I have to teach a class, that is compromise. I need you to be quiet when you're loud all the time means that you need to not be in that relation. That is changing somebody, and that's just not healthy. Now, the other side note with this one is that I also think there's a fine line between when somebody is working on something and when somebody's not. So let's say you have an issue with your partner and they actually agree with you that it is a problem and they are actively working on it. Let's say they're in counseling. They 100% agree with you. They want to change. They're not changing because you want them to change, but they can acknowledge that that's an issue. That is something that you really need to decide, okay, am I going to stay with this until they get better? That's a little bit more of a different ground. It's when you literally want to change somebody and they don't see it or they're doing it because you want them to. That's when you need to step back and remember that love doesn't work if you're trying to change somebody. And this has to do with the assumptions all around it. Now, we could probably do an entire weekend workshop on this one takeaway because it really, truly is healing when you understand this one. I can say, for me, really, truly processing this, that if something isn't working in a relationship and it's because I need them to be different, then it's not healthy. And on the flip side, if they want me to change and I don't want to, no, thank you. It's better to go find somebody else who actually wants to be in that relationship. So how do we implement this chapter? So my number one tip is to simply ask yourself, what am I assuming? It is one of the most powerful questions that you can ask yourself at any point in time. I continually ask myself this question, not only in personal relationships, but in business relationships. Anytime that there could possibly be an assumption, I stop and say, okay, what assumptions am I making? Now, the second thing that you can do, and this one is very specific for the assumptions that you make about yourself, is continually be working on self-discovery. The more that you know about yourself, the more that you uncover, the less you will assume about yourself. So really set aside time in your life to do this continual self-discovery process. The great part about self-discovery process is not only will you stop making assumptions about yourself, but it will show you what needs to be healed, where you can tweak things, and it really truly leads to a life of inner peace and happiness. Now, my third tip is you need to speak up for your needs. If you need something, whether it's just a physical need or an emotional need, you need to communicate your wants. You cannot assume that anybody knows exactly what you need and want. And I'm actually going to say this because I've had this happen to me. People can't read your mind. So you cannot say, well, we're so close, you should know what I want. No, that's not how this works. Let's say you have a face that is the I'm hungry face. Well, what if you're also confused and somebody's newer in your life and they get it confused with the hungry face and they bring you a giant dinner and you were just confused? So do not assume that people know what you're thinking. Tell them, clarify it. All right, which leads us to the next tip in applying this for the life. Is ask questions. You have got to get yourself used to asking questions when you don't understand. I personally believe questions are one of the most powerful things that you can provide yourself in every area of life, whether it's asking yourself questions, asking other people questions. The only way that you're going to learn and grow is through questions. This also will improve your communication in relationships because if you're asking questions to make sure that you understand it, then the other person will feel better about it. They'll actually get what they want. So Ask questions. Now, my final tip for implementing is actually I'm going to give you 2 other questions that you can ask yourself that are worded just slightly differently because sometimes our mind can't process a specific word. So I wanted to give you a couple other options of ways you can ask yourself this. So the first one is, am I unclear about something? Really ask yourself what you're confused about. What part of what's going on are you unclear about? Now, the second one that you can do is, do I need to clarify myself to somebody else? So if you are expecting one thing and something else is coming back at you, you might want to stop and look at it and say, what do I need to clarify to get this closer to what I need? And then the final thing that you can ask yourself is why. I love why. There's a thing called the why ladder where you just keep asking why, and using this in an area where you think you're making an assumption will really help you get to the core of why you're making that assumption, and then you can go about fixing it and moving on. So I hope this helped you. If it did, I'd love it if you would click subscribe so you get the next chapter, and we'll see you next week.